I couldn't go on the property for months because when a military jet crashes, there's explosive bolts everywhere. There's classified hardware maybe laying around that the Chinese might try and steal. So I couldn't even get on the property. So finally I asked, I said, well, what do I do? And they said, well, you could sue the government.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. I have a couple gentlemen on the show with me today. One of them is someone that doesn't really need an introduction because he has been on the show a couple times before in episodes number 62 and episode number 70, and that is Jack Rowe, who's a land acquisition and development expert based out of North Texas. And then we have Ken Mitchell joining us as well, who's the owner at Mosaic Real Estate and partner at Mosaic Realty. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, before we hit record, we were already having a good conversation, and we had to stop that conversation because I was afraid we were going to miss out on so much good stuff. But I think, when we came into this, we were chatting a little bit just about what we wanted to dig into. And really the theme of what we were going to talk about was, as I have written down here, is helping new land guys become the best land guys. And so really interested in getting your guys' thoughts on how we kind of get that next generation ready, and what are some of the things happening today? What are some of the things maybe you guys do in helping that next generation? So either one of you want to kind of take a start on this, take a stab at some things that you're seeing out there?
I'd rather hear from Ken.
There was something that I think resonated before you hit the record button, and I think perhaps I might hit on that point a little bit. This is a profession, it's a vocation that in many cases is more easily taught by shadowing and by doing than it is by textbook knowledge. It would be virtually impossible. I've thought about it from time to time, and I do write about land acquisition and development, but it's hard to put down on paper. It's easier to mentor and to have people shadow you because the number of infinite variations to each piece of land is it seems simple. We drive by, we look at a piece of land and say, oh, look, another piece of dirt. But there are literally dozens to hundreds of variables from one tract to the other. And how you approach that, how you discover it, how you take your mental pick and shovel and try and discern what it is that gives value, what it is that gives risk. I think, to me, it's you select good candidates that have an aptitude. You got to have a love for it. And I think it's something that an apprenticeship, if there were such a thing as a land acquisition and development apprenticeship program or indentured servant, whatever you'd want to call it, I think that might be a really good idea.
What do you think? So, question on this, I was thinking about this coming into the conversation, is we see a lot of people out there right now just flipping land. And I know I've seen Jack comment on this before on LinkedIn, where they're not really adding any value to it. They're just going out, buying land, and then they're just flipping it for a higher price. And so when I think about what a land guy actually is do you have a definition or something you think of when you think of what is a land guy?
For one, my hope is that people coming into this industry, and whether it's a career or like a side hustle, if you can call it that, is the permanence and importance of what they're doing. It's not making an app that you can use or not. It's not making a sandwich which you can enjoy or not. You're building effectively the physical form of a city that changing it is cost prohibitive, and actually only gets more so into the future as the costs of labor go up. So I just, it feels like a gut punch anytime I see people just viewing the development of land as a purely kind of financial matter, without attending to the design, the thinking about the end user, which may very well be your own grandchildren, right? Or, there's no telling, but it's such, and I know that land guys, typically aren't thought of as important, or it's kind of, there could be jokes about land guys, right? But the product of what we're doing is incredibly impactful to many, many, many more people than most other jobs. And so that's something that when kind of mentoring and training the coming generations is to feel that sense of responsibility for the outputs of their effort. And maybe that'll make them be a little more careful, a little more thoughtful about how they go about developing stuff, which there's execution, which I think is a lot of what Ken was alluding to just then, but then there's also planning. That's where you can really shine, right? Is how do you plan it? How do you lay out the site? How does it integrate with the existing community and so on? So,
Jack, I'm going to circle back to the question of flipping, because I think I can tell a good story because I'm an old guy. I'm supposed to tell stories, right? Oh, there's the old guy. He's going to tell a story. Okay, so I think what you were referring to, uh, I would call a promoter. A promoter might be someone that goes out and talks to a landowner and says, "Hey, why don't you let me have an option on your land and give me a couple of months?" And they go out and they sell it to somebody else. They don't really do anything. I actually taught flipping as a cash flow device when I worked for a major home builder. And my premise was, we encounter deals that we don't want to buy for one reason or another. And we shouldn't let those go because if Jack, for example, looks at a piece of property and he spends 50 or 60 or $70,000 on it, and he understands it, and maybe he does a little bit of work on engineering, and maybe he somehow gets the keys to the value in the property, but his company says, we really don't want to buy that. It's not something in my world you should let go. So about a year or two into a program that I was setting up for land development for a major home builder, I brought everybody in and I explained how we were all going to do a flip the next year. And I said, I want every single one of you, I'm going to explain to you how we do a flip. We're going to find property that we don't want, where we've added value in one way or another. And then if we decide we're not going to build it, we're going to sell it to somebody else. And so I want every one of you to bring in a flip this year. I'm going to do one myself. I was also in the challenge. So we went through the course of a year, and properties would come into our portfolio. We would put them under contract, and then we would, for one reason or another, say, well, the division here, let's say Jacksonville division, we've got enough product, we don't want any more risk, we're not going to do that deal. We would go out to other builders in the market and say, we have a deal that's just not right for us, and we would flip it. You probably know Don Dykstra, who is with Bloomfield Homes in Dallas. Don used to say, Ken is my best land guy, and I was working for Ashton Woods. Ashton Woods couldn't do all the deals that I could find. So if I had a deal that looked really interesting, I'd bring it to Don, and Don would buy it and pay a fee. Because we put our time and our energy from our staff, and we risk pursuit dollars understanding the property. Rather than just let it go and write off that cost, we'd sell it to another home builder. So the end of that story is that at the end of that year, I had a flip I was very proud of. I flipped something and we got $150,000. The best flip that year was $17 million to the bottom line on the company. So we flipped a deal for $17 million, but we added value. It was a property that was unplatted, that had some environmental issues that we solved over the course of a year. And then the division did not have a use for it. We sold it. That property made $17 million. It was the worst deal we ever did, because then the home building company said, wow, why don't we just do this? Why are we building houses? And they didn't realize that sort of deal. And I told them, this is a once in a career, once in a lifetime deal. You don't just go buy a piece of property. But we had the financial risk. We had several $100,000 in earnest money up. We spent several $100,000 solving the problem. And then we flipped it. But it was really a unicorn. But my point is that in each of the deals that I've done a fair number of flips um, in my career, but I've always added value. I've never just put a piece of property under contract and then gone to sleep, found the buyer, sold it to him. I feel like it's a responsibility. You shouldn't get something for nothing. And it's not fair to the people like us that are trying to service customers, a customer being a home builder, because all we're doing is we're screwing up the market. If we don't add value, we're screwing up the market dynamics. And if you want to look at its worst case, this is why housing is so expensive, is because we do have these imperfections in the market where we have people that are grabbing a piece of the pie that really don't deserve it. They're just being a little sneakier than we are.
Yeah, I feel like that's maybe what I was seeing. Just some posts of people are like, just bought this property, and they're building courses around it, right? So I just bought this property for $10,000, and I just sold it for $50,000, made $40,000. Here's my check.
Yes.
It's like, buy my course, and then I'll
Yes.
show you how to do the same thing.
Let me go down the trail on that, right? And just project out the future consequences of that. And I like what Ken touched on, which is disrupting the market, right? Landowners talk. You can't really value land based on comps, but a lot of times landowners see their value as a comparable to another sale, right? And so that psychological factor does play a role in the ability to sell and buy land, right? And so if someone's coming in and if they're squeezing out $40,000 of value of that piece of land, that's $40,000. Depends on the size of the land that could have gone towards improvements, amenities, landscaping. You could have spent the same amount of money and had a much nicer end product, right? That's just one iteration. If that starts to set the bar for what land is worth, right? Because suddenly you could have gone in, bought something at a reasonable price, spent more money adding value to get to this really nice end product, which is a community where people will live for generations, raising families and things. Suddenly you haven't destroyed the value. You've taken the potential value that could have served hundreds and maybe thousands of people and put it in the pocket of one person, right? Which I'm not going to go down that tangent, right? But the enjoyment is reduced. And so if that happens multiple times, suddenly home builders don't get to sell homes at cost plus. The market sets prices, right? So as you increase the cost of all the inputs, it can turn out that it costs more than what the market will pay. That's a problem, right? So if you're not adding value and you're just removing value from the equation for yourself, you're unsettling a land market, which is it's the foundation of everything, right? Everything is built on land. And so if you make the most core component of building anything way more expensive, from taking a 10,000 piece and flipping it in a week for 50, you've just destroyed a lot of potential value that could have been added, I guess I'll say, by someone who was more in the business of adding value to deliver a product instead of how can I insert myself in this equation and take something out real quick with no risk and no skin in the game. That's kind of like my moral outlook on it. But what Ken was describing, to me, that's not in my mind when I think of land flipping. That's a good use of resources. You spent the money engineering and investigating for what I would call price discovery, and then he was able to sell it to someone else who would use it to build homes that people would live in and enjoy. So if anything, that's almost like recycling resources. They spent the money, right? They allowed someone to take advantage of it instead of that person having to tie it up from scratch, spend all those same money, those same dollars again, maybe with the same engineering group, right? Which again, that money could have been used to amenitize a property, further add value. So I guess if you're catching a common thread for me, how can I add value? How can I maximize the value of land for the end user, which effectively is me or any of us, right?
Do you see many people who just like the image of being a land guy versus actually doing the work that's necessary?
I certainly do. I certainly do. In fact, I had to hire over a 2 year period. I had to hire 50 land guys to staff up a national home builder. And I would tell you that you got to see the personality type. And there's a personality type, and it's probably I probably shouldn't mention the developer, but I think everybody's read The Art of the Deal, and they all want to be like him, and they want to do big deals, and they want to put up a lot of money, and they just they want to have a $20 million deal under contract just to say they did a $20 million deal. A good land guy works a $500,000 deal as hard and the same way as a $20 million deal. Somebody that's got an ego problem just goes chasing the big deals. Sometimes the most profitable deals are the smaller deals because the big deals are hard to make work over time. When you pay that much money, it puts intense pressure on the deal, and they're very subject to the ebb and flow of the market. So it's hard to take a really, really large master plan community and anticipate the number of times you're going to have a depression or a 9/11 or a retrenchment in the market. So I think there are people that feel that there's a romance about being a land guy. I completely, Jack, I think you'd say the same thing. And I think the Landman, the show on TV, that's kind of
Yeah.
and we attract a lot of colorful people. I would say that some of the most colorful people I've ever met are developers, land guys. I mean, that's part of what I like about the business, because you do meet some people that are just they're crazy talented in an odd, strange way, and they think in a manner and very entrepreneurial and very very creative. Uh, I think the thing that I see a lot is that there are a lot of people that love the creativity of the business, because you have a chance to take a vacant piece of land and a field, and there's a lot of difference between what one land guy and another land guy or developer would do with a piece of property. When I started, I was doing all FHA housing, FHA approved housing, and it was strict grid. You get the most number of lots you can to the acre, and it was ugly. It was really, really ugly. Um, I had to really fight to get my clients to have a little creativity. Um, and so over time, I got better at that. But there's a lot of difference between how we all do our jobs and how we guide and shape what happens to land. And some of it's are the people we work for. Some of it's the people who are our clients. And we don't always get to interject. I mean, in a perfect world, Jack and I would find some guy that has $100 million and we just go play. Give me 5 tracks and let me try new housing types. Let me try new ways of conserving water. Let's try and do this with a package plant rather than build 10 miles of off-site sanitary sewer. There's so many things we all want to do that we don't have the money to do and the liberty to do. Sometimes I've done some what I call micro deals myself. And those are super, super fun, where you just take a really small piece of land without a lot of risk. And when I do it, I get to do whatever I want. Those have been the most satisfying deals, even though they were super, super small. But now that I'm at the later stage of my career, you kind of hold all your retirement money in a little wad and you say, I'm not going to risk this anymore. So, if I had unlimited wealth, I would be buying new tracks every year and playing. But I also, more so than probably most any guy that you'll interview on the show, I know the horrible risk in the business. And I've seen so many lives that have been devastated by making just one tiny bad decision. And so I've kind of got an aversion. I hate buying land. I love the business, but I hate buying land because the second you buy it, everything, every risk, every piece of history associated with that land, you now own that risk yourself. And that's, for me, that's terrifying.
Do you have any stories? Oh, sorry, Jack, you were going to say something.
Well, I wanted to add on because that's another side of the land flipper thing that uh, didn't come to mind, which it has before, right? Land flippers are typically people selling courses. Those guys aren't really experts in what they're doing, right? They might have taken a course themselves, right? They maybe got lucky one time, maybe they didn't, and they're just selling courses. Who knows? You can guarantee that they're not an expert in what they're doing. Every one of those people that's selling uh, get rich quick by flipping land, right? Um, yeah, those people still fundraise, and doctors and dentists and teachers and people who are putting their savings into these deals. You're not guaranteed to make your money back, you know, and you're more likely to lose it putting it with somebody who is not an expert. Because to Ken's point, every piece of land is different. They all have a unique flavor of hair on them, and there's a million ways to lose $1 million in this business. And your best way to avoid that is by working with someone who's already lost those millions of dollars, right? Or has had enough experiences to where they have like a matrix in their head of like these are all the things that can go wrong. They might even be unaware of some that they haven't encountered. But the more mistakes you can find that your land guy's already gone through, that's what you want. They've already taken their lumps, right? And so that's a risk, not for the flipper themselves, but for their victims, you could say. Certainly, some of them will be successful, but the ones who lose their clients' money, right? Or they do a syndication and they raise money and they lose it. They're not on LinkedIn or Twitter blasting about their failure, right? And so that's the survivor's bias. But I would hate to see someone I know lose their money to something like that. And so it's disruptive to the land market in general if it's done poorly. Don't want to throw everyone in the same basket, right? But and then you're not being a good steward of other people's hard-won resources, right? Which is another thing that I pretty serious about. Most decent people would be, you know.
So Ryan, I am going to tell you the story you asked for, but it's not a story of poor due diligence. It's just a story of stuff that happens with land when you buy land. When I was a very, very, very young man, I was developing a piece of property and had the opportunity to buy a piece next door to that was just enough for 11 lots. The landowner said he would sell it to me. I was putting in the roads and utilities. I was putting everything in to service that property. It was a made deal. It was probably the most made deal you could ever buy. I asked my client if I could buy it. He said, sure, I'm not interested in 11 extra lots. I already got 150. So I bought the property with a buddy of mine. We started to work on developing the 11 lots. And a week after we bought the property, an Air Force jet crashed on the property. Had beautiful, beautiful trees. It was in Grand Prairie, where Jack knows where Grand Prairie is. It was near the Naval Air Station. And there was a pilot that had engine trouble. And right before he crashed the plane and punched out, he said, I'm going to aim for an undeveloped piece of property so I don't hurt anybody. And so he crash landed. His plane crash landed. He ejected. His plane clear cut my entire 11 lots that had the most beautiful live oak trees, which all went up in a fireball.
Wow.
So now I've got a beautiful piece of property. The lots, and now I'm going to date myself, Jack. The lots I was going to sell them for like $25,000, and I was going to kill it. I got to get $25,000 a lot for 11 lots. So I'm going to kill it. Well, about $5,000 to $10,000 of that value was in the trees because it had beautiful, beautiful live oak trees on the property. So now I've got a piece of property. I got to figure out what to do with it. Well, I couldn't go on the property for months because when a military jet crashes, there's explosive bolts everywhere. There's classified hardware maybe laying around that the Chinese might try and steal. So I couldn't even get on the property. So finally I asked, I said, well, what do I do? And they said, well, you could sue the government. I said, okay. And they said, but you got to wait 6 months. You can't sue the government for 6 months. So for 6 months, I had to sit on my hands, make a list of all the damage they did to the property. And at the end of 6 months, they settled with me on the very, very last day and wrote me a check for $60,000 for what I call emergency landing fees. By that time, the market had softened and the lots were not worth anywhere near what I projected. So I think at the end of the day, a deal that I was figuring I was going to maybe make $250,000, I maybe made 30. Plus, I had the emergency landing fees, but some of it I had to use for cleanup. I had no idea what kind of environmental impact because planes use diesel fuel. And fortunately, I think all the diesel, when it blew up, I think most of the diesel burned off. But that was the perfect deal. That was the absolute perfect deal for a young man to do to start his land development career, take that money, leverage it into a larger tract, and then eventually I would be the largest and wealthiest land developer in the country. Well, as a result of that, I didn't do another deal for 30 or 40 years myself personally, because I learned a really, really hard lesson. And fortunately, I made a little money, but I learned there's no way you can write into a pro forma a plane falling out of the sky and blowing up your property. And stuff like that happens more often than you think. It really, really does. So long story, but an interesting story.
That is.
That's a crazy one.
This episode of the Land Development Podcast is brought to you by Groove. Groove gives you access to over 150 million parcel records across all 50 states, with key ownership information and attributes right at your fingertips. You can also overlay important layers like floodplains, wetlands, school districts, and many more. And when you talk to a landowner, you can track the entire conversation, calls, emails, and notes directly on the parcel. So a year or two later, when you reach back out, you'll know exactly how the last conversation went. Start your free trial today at letsgroove.com/signup. That's letsgroov.com/signup. All right, let's get back to the show. When you were talking before, you talked about some of the traits that people that you've come across who were, maybe good and people that weren't as good at it. And you had mentioned entrepreneurial, someone that has no or a low ego. Also maybe someone who's somewhat creative. Are there other traits that you can think of that make somebody a good land guy?
I'm going to say I had a test I used to give because I had to hire acquisition people and development people. So when I hired acquisition people, and I think Jack knows what I'm talking about, I had a 2-minute test. If you came into my office and sat down in a chair across from me, if you couldn't connect with me in 2 minutes, the interview was over. Whether you knew it or not, if you couldn't connect with me within 2 minutes, you were done. And I pretty much followed that rule because, Jack, I know you're going to go, I know this is going to resonate with you. We deal with dozens, if not hundreds of different personality types, male, female, crazy people, smart people. I mean, the number of people that we have to deal with, you have to relate to every single one of those. You have to connect, and you oftentimes don't have but a nanosecond to make that connection because most people have a really negative view of real estate brokers. They have a really negative view even of home builders. People in our profession, and a lot of it I think is residential real estate agents have a terrible reputation. And a lot of people suffer at the hands of bad agents. So if you can't get a level of trust and connectivity and communication going right away, the amount of time people are going to give you is very, very short. You don't have time to fall in love, so to speak. You can't go on a second date and a third date. you have to hit a home run with the landowner right away. And I can't tell you how the best of us do that, because over time you just kind of get a sixth sense. There's a lot of cheats that we do, and I shouldn't reveal this
Hey,
on.
hey,
Well, I shouldn't reveal this, but before I have a meeting with somebody, now that we have social media, I do a super deep dive on every piece of fragment of information, because if you know a guy loves dogs and he's got a particular breed and you bump into him and oh yeah, I like your dog. I got a dog like that, or you know what I'm saying? It's if you can find a common thread immediately, you just have to do that. Jack, do you think that's disingenuous to go through the research project of being good at connecting with people? I find it's a good skill.
that's just due diligence, I'd say. But it's honestly, it's not really my tactic. Is normally I try to, well, I don't try. Just I'm very frank about the situation and my position within the arrangement, and try to communicate incentives that align with everyone's goals. So I'm not the best small talker, but yeah, I mean, connecting, obviously, likability is important, right? But also, I want to ensure like I respect the position that I play, because I'm really nobody, right? I'm occupying a position that's pretty cool and allows me to do
Yeah.
important stuff, right? So if I'm dealing with the landowner who actually has something, uh, I just see my position with a lot of kind of duty to them to try to do right by them and uh, the land that they were left or that want to pass on to their kids. So I try to communicate, I guess, my feeling about the importance of what we're doing, and sometimes that works. It depends on the individual.
Jack, if you want a success formula, I want you to cut your hair and put in some, have it streaked with gray, because I noticed that as I got older, as soon as you enter a room, people look at you and they automatically talk to you like you're the subject matter expert, like you're the guru. They just assume because you survived and got to be this old that somehow, you're some guru on a mountaintop. And it's kind of embarrassing because I go to many meetings when I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the subject matter expert. And everybody wants to talk to me. It's like, oh, there's an old guy. He probably knows what he's doing. So I hate to say it, but I take advantage of that. The last thing in the world I'd ever do is color my hair or try and get more hair.
Well, I'll be bald before I go gray, but we'll see.
I like being an old guy.
So what else? So somebody who's in this industry and wants to, like we said, wants to become the best possible land guy that they can become. What's that path look like for them? I assume they need to get the experience, like you mentioned. Is mentorship a big part of that? Seeking out someone who's already in the role that they want to be in, or it has the type of success that they want to have, and like seek out some of those people and try to do that.
Can
Yeah,
I
go ahead, Jack.
can I go first? You reminded me of something. For one, I'm relatively young. I've been in this business for about 10 years, right? 35. Um, Done a lot of other things. Uh, but for some reason, it's just my bent, I guess, that I feel like I needed help in my life, right? So I try to, anytime someone asks for help, I want to help. Um, I guess the cat got out of the bag, and then there's so much help being asked of me that I don't have time for it, right? Uh, but mentorship is definitely a thing. But I don't know that you can get from mentorship what going through the process yourself. We don't really value college kids' theoretical knowledge when they come out, right? You know, so instinctually we know you got to have a firsthand experience if you're truly going to know something. So I would say get your foot in the door, get a job in the business, right? If you want to learn it, do something related to it and try to wrangle your way in there. And then you can have mentors at the same time, but that should be, it's supplementary. It should augment your education. It can maybe help direct you to pay attention to certain things you might have passed over. Uh, And speaking of mentoring, I had one guy, Kelvin Jerome, reached out. Or I think he posted something on LinkedIn years ago, broadcasting for help, right? And I like that. I like people who ask for help. And so I talked to him, and we had kind of a mentorship relationship. And what really impressed me with him, which gave me more motivation to keep it up, is that the advice, he would ask for advice, I would give it, and then he would do it. I can't tell you how rare it is for people who ask for advice and
Agreed.
act on it.
Agreed.
And so I was like,
Totally.
okay, I told him, I was like, hey, here's a local builder. There's one builder in town. You want to get into land development? Go tell them that you'll work for free and that you just want to learn. That's what I did, and it worked for me. And sure enough, he did it, right? And now I just saw he announced he's got a position with Toll Brothers, I think in Houston, like 3 or 4 years later. So he did it. He just listened to the advice if you ask for it. And it's really admirable to me people who are courageous enough to ask for help, especially publicly, because it can seems like a insufficiency, but it's really an insufficiency to be incapable of asking for help when you need it. And so I like to reward that. That's my 2 cents on it.
I'm fortunate that I have more free time because I don't know what level of retirement I'm in, but I'm in some level. I don't know if it's 5%. I don't know. It changes every day. But I do have, as Jack said, I do have people contact me through LinkedIn. And they say, hey, can I call you? And it's like, well, yeah, I guess. And those always lead to really satisfying discussions. But, the one thing I did recently that I think would resonate, probably particularly with Jack, is I had a friend of mine, Rodney Hall, asked me if I would act as a paid mentor for a home builder who had a young land guy who had really good core capabilities, they felt, but he didn't have anybody in the organization that could really mentor him. So they paid me to mentor him. So once a week, we would have a meeting by Zoom, and we would always start the conversation, tell me what your week was like. Tell me about the deals you have in the pipeline. Tell me about your development issues. So first we would deal with what are the things you're struggling with? And that would usually lead to, I found a landowner and I really want his property, but I'm not sure how to approach him. So then we would talk about deal structure for specific deals. You almost have to have a palette to paint from rather than just talk by way of examples or stories. So I found that, and I don't know the formal name for this, but I found that this kind of interaction where we would go over your workflow and we would go through your workflow and I would look for opportunities to impart some angles to use. Maybe we'd look at land plans together. And what I taught this young man as well is how to question things, because I think one of the most fundamental things that I see in the business is young people don't want to question their engineers or their land planners. And sometimes engineers make mistakes, land planners make mistakes. So we would talk about alternate things, and I would say things like, well, I don't like where the amenity center is. Your land planner might like it, but I don't like it from a marketing standpoint. It really should be over here. So every week we would go through that, and it was an unbelievable learning experience for him. He's now a good friend, and he now calls me pro bono. And actually, I needed something the other day from him, a template that you guys use, Jack, for doing comparable analysis, the chart that shows the price graph.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't want to have to build it. So I called him and I said, I don't want to have to build this spreadsheet. Can you send one to me? He said, sure. So he's in the situation a lot of my mentees find themselves in, that eventually I start sniping some of the things that they can help me with. And so it becomes a two-way flow rather than a one-way flow. And those are the most satisfying relationships. And those endure over time. And we transition to becoming good friends.
That's awesome. There's this YouTube channel that I watch called Pilot Debrief. And so he talks a lot about plane crashes, and a lot of times you'll have plane crashes where you have very experienced pilots and there's two of them, and the main pilot has so much experience that there's this authority bias where the one who's on the right controls, they don't question them even though they know something's not right. They won't question that
Yes.
individual. It feels like that authority bias is definitely something built into just built into society in general, where if somebody's in a lab coat, you're probably not going to question them on something. You're going to trust them. And I know there's been studies too of where somebody would tell you can't cross the road at a certain spot dressed in normal clothes, and then you don't listen to them. But if they're dressed up like a doctor or in a suit, then you trust them and you listen to them. And so, yeah, that's really interesting. It definitely plays in a lot of different places. Well, we are at, what are we at? 40 minutes right now. So I think we could go on for a long time, and I know there's a lot of stuff that we still could cover. So we'll have to do this again on another one. But maybe before we wrap up, each of you, do you have any just parting thoughts in general? We've got people listening in who are new to the industry. We've got people who are seasoned veterans in the industry as well. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, and then we can also get how they can connect with each of you too.
I'll go first. First, thanks for having me again, Ryan, and it's an honor and pleasure to get to chat with you and Ken here today. So, thanks again, and I got to do a shameless plug for the Texas A&M's Master of Land and Property Development program. I'm, I guess, the incoming president of the Advisory Council, the Development Industry Advisory Council, that kind of consults and guides the program in some way. So. It was a great boon to my career and life. So if you're looking to learn more about this skill, this business, that's a great place to look, at least.
I'm going to offer an endorsement for that because one of the Texas A&M guys called me the other day, was in town in Denver for a conference, and we met. I was very impressed with him, very, very impressed. And he actually had the guts to ask me a question about contours and about how to read contour intervals. And he said, I just don't know. It's hard for me to understand contours. And I said, well, dude, you're not going to get it from a textbook. Go get a paper map and get a contour map, get a USGS map, go out to a place that's got a lot of relief and look at the lines. And you can see, oh, that's how it's expressed on a contour map when you see a creek or you see a cliff or you see steep contour intervals, you see it's a steep slope. And hopefully he's going to go back and do that. But he's one of those people that had the guts to call me and said, hey, do you have any time at all? And I drove to Denver. One of the reasons I drove to Denver to attend a few sessions is to meet him and to help him. But I'm going to come back and circle back to just, you asked for one thing. I always tell people that are interested in the business, and I was surprised, the University of Denver student that I'm working with, they haven't encouraged her to do this. I think you have to get a real estate license immediately, because there's a level of professionalism and study and testing. There's a lot of people that do what we do that don't have a real estate license. I don't know why. Even if you're developing, I just feel like, and then go out and practice, help your friends sell stuff. You don't even have to take a commission, but being out there, you have to be in transactions to really get the full feel for every aspect of the real estate experience. So I would say you got to get a real estate license.
Inactive, but you still have it.
Yeah. And Jack, I've had mine. I'm just doing continuing ed in Texas for 40 years.
Amazing.
And it's like, wow, I can't believe I've had.
How many digits is your number?
It's crazy. And I find myself looking at this stuff going, well, I know this. Why should I have to take continuing ed? But I find something new that I don't know. And I want to wrap up with this, Ryan. The reason I think, and Jack may not even, I'm sure he'll admit to this, we love the business because it's crazy interesting and you're always having to learn new things. So you've got to have an inquisitive mind. You've got to have a detective's mind. You've got to have a professor's mind. If you've got a lazy mind and you just want to do the same thing the same way every day, don't go into this business because you'll die. You'll never make it. But guys like Jack and I that are just always looking in the corners and trying to find cool new things, we're good at it because I think we're super, super interested in it. It's a passion.
It's enjoying the process, right? Yeah, I like doing it. I don't. The outcome is nice, right? But it's just fun in itself. There's so much to learn and discover, like you said.
It's a lifetime learning experience.
Well, you guys are both great follows on LinkedIn. So I would say anybody listening in right now, that connect with them on LinkedIn, follow them on LinkedIn, and they post some great stuff. Ken has all sorts of stories that he posts, and so you'll get to see some of those there.
Old guys post stories. What am I going to do? Show pictures of my dog?
Yeah, right, right. Any other way that Ken, that you want people to connect with you or find out more about your companies?
I I want to do a plug for a new group that Erica Sinner is working on called Ladies in Land. She's doing good work, and I would say that some of my best land guys were ladies, and there's not enough emphasis on that. Being a land guy is not gender specific. I just use the term as I should use it I should come up with a new term, but uh, I think Erica's doing good work. We're trying to get a Colorado chapter open here. Uh, but I would say, just one final thing. I take an hour or two a week to talk to somebody brand new that needs help. And I don't charge for it. I just do it if my schedule permits. So if you're on LinkedIn and you want to message me and I love getting these questions from people because it really makes my brain work extra hard. And if you've ever been around people with dementia, you don't ever want to be that guy. So I am feeding my brain with all of these land people calling me with all these problems. It's important. And so you could be saving an old land guy by calling with a question.
Perfect. Well, guys, I really do appreciate you hopping on here and talking about this. And everybody tuning in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. And we will talk to you all next week.